Hello and welcome. We are in Yerushalmi, Berachos, Daf Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph, in the Oz V'Hadar print. And I want to talk about one specific thing today and a little bit of interesting historical, a little bit of a tangent, but interesting stuff. The Gemara here is talking about whether dead people know anything. And the Gemara is very parallel to the Bavli on Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, very fascinating. Ayin Sham and the Marsha, other Mefarshim as well, about the Ruchos that we're speaking. We find a very similar conversation and stories over here, although there are some differences, as we're always trying to notice. Not for now. Right now, I'm going to focus on Minayin Shad Tzadikim Afil Misasin Kruyim Chayim, something that the Bavli says as well, that the Tzadikim, even when in their death, they're considered alive. How do we know? It says, Hashem says to Moshe, this is the land that I promised to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Lamar. And this Yerushalmi is reading it, that Matam Lomar Lamar. What does it mean, Lamar, to say over? So Amar Lo, Hashem told Moshe, Lech ve'amar la'avos, tell the Avos, Kol Mashe, Hisnesi lahem asisi levnechem acharechem, everything that I promised them, I actually did. So when you're going to die, and you're going to go up to Shemaim, and you're going to talk to the Avos, you're going to tell them that I took them out of Mitzrayim, and I gave them the Eretz Yisrael, etc. So there are some other midrashim that focus on the words Asher Nishbati Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, and they seem to say that why are they being called by that name after death? It must be that they're considered alive. That's very shver because people still have a name after they're alive. So I don't really understand exactly how those other Chazals are using that. But what we have in front of us, the Mefarshim explain very, very clearly that what's going on is that you see that there's an element of Chayim, there's an element of life here. The way that the Mefarshim explain, you can look at the Pnei Moshe and others, is that the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is going and talking to the Avos after they passed away and telling them this information about what's happening on Earth shows that there is some element of life, so to speak. That these tzaddikim, even though they've passed away from this world, they're still alive. Now, there's a lot of discussions in that Gemara and Berachos and here as well, and Rav Dasser brings this down based on Rav Yonos and Eibshitz, that there's a lot of contradictions in Chazal, even in the Gemaras themselves, whether the Avos know or don't know what's going on. On the one hand, you're saying they know what's going on. The other hand, Moshe is telling them. So the Gemara itself, the Bavli itself addresses that and says that it's lahachzik tova, meaning seemingly that they really knew what was going on, but that it was actually that Moshe should get Hakar Satov. Thank you for being the shliach of Hashem to bring them what Hashem promised them, which is a beautiful pshat, etc. But other Mefarshim, like Rav Yonos and Eibshitz, his whole mahalach on the Gemara is that a person is only as connected to this world after death as he was in this world while he was alive. So meaning a person that's very, very connected to this world, so on him the Chazal say that it's a makom rima v'tolea, that there's a certain torture that they'll feel from that. But someone who's disconnected, so they don't care and they don't know and they don't feel any pain either. So why is it that the Avos want to be connected? Because the Avos cared about their children, and so for spiritual things that they cared about, that they came out of Mitzrayim, they became a nation, they got the Torah, they moved to Eretz, Hashem took them to Eretz Yisrael, that the Avos want to know. Okay, so I want to talk about this idea of tzadikim b'sasim Kruyim Chayim, because there's a very famous and probably not so well understood, and I hope I shed some light, but you can look at it, but I don't claim to understand it fully, but Sefer Chassidim. Let's talk about the Sefer Chassidim historically just for a moment. So Sefer Chassidim was written by Rabbi Yehuda ben Shmuel. He was from Regensburg, which is Speyer, okay? And he was born in 1140, and he died in 1217. He was about 77 years old. And he's considered a Kabbalist, and he writes very, very fascinating things. The Sefer Chassidim that I'm using is the print by Moser of Cook, which has amazing Hagos from Reuven and Margolius, which I'll quote today in Mitzvah. So let me just tell you a quick background. Basically, the Sefer Chassidim's father is Shmuel. And by the way, this sheds a lot of light, because in one of his Savah, he says that no one should name their children Yehuda or Shmuel. And this is very hard to understand. Like, how in the world, remember there's a whole conversation, famous known to Yehuda, about whether, and famous Egros Moshe, whether a person is mechuyev to listen to the Tzavah, Avar Yehuda Chassid, or everything in the Sefer. The basic idea that Noda Yehuda posits is that it was only written for his descendants. And Rabbi Kamenetsky actually explains this one. He says that since Rabbi Yehuda Chassid's name was Yehuda, and his father's name was Shmuel, he didn't want any of his descendants named after him. It's only for his descendants. There's a raya that it's only for his descendants, because it makes sense, because he didn't want them to have a pressure they had to be like their grandfather. Of course, there are many people that say the opposite, that maybe it's an aspirational thing, etc. But that's not for now. But that's just an interesting discussion about Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, and there's some interesting things in the Sefer. But I want to explain like this, that Rabbi Yehuda Chassid's father, Shmuel, had 3 children that we know of. Rabbi Yehuda Chassid was one, very famous one, major Kabbalist, that he inherited from his grandfather, Clonimus, these Kisvei Kodesh with Kabbalah, and obviously passed that on. He also had a daughter named Golda, and she was married to Ramosha Darshan. If you know that name, you probably learned it in Rashi, where Rashi quotes this famous Ramosha Darshan. Ramosha Darshan apparently was a huge Kabbalist as well, and he actually was the Rebbe of Zerachi Halevi, the Baal HaMaor, and also the Ravid, who was also, I believe, the one who fought against the Rambam. And the Ravid's son was Rav Yitzchak Saginar. He was a blind Kabbalist, very, very famous in the Kabbalistic school of thought. And he was the Rebbe, this Rav Yitzchak Saginar, of Rabbeinu Ezra and Rabbeinu Azriel, who are the Rabbeim in Kabbalah of the Ramban. So you see there's a lot of generations here of the Kabbalah of the Ramban that's coming from here. There was another child also named Avram, who was also a son of Shmuel. Remember, he had Yehuda, Golda, and Avram. Avraham from Ashpira, he was a Rebbe of Rav Eliezer Rokeach. Eliezer Rokeach. And the Rokeach is also a very, very famous Kabbalist. Anyway, so that's a little background of Yehuda Chassid. So we're talking about someone that lived in the 12th century, 1140 to 1217. Okay, so he writes in Tuf Shin Chavtes, all the way at the end. And it's actually an addition that might not even be part of Sefer Chassidim. It says, in this print, it even says, Zeh hutak mi Sefer Chassidim acher. I got this from a different one, but it's 1139 over there. So he writes that Hanefesh b'misa k'mo b'chayim. When a person dies, it's like they're still alive. Their soul is still there. And Chazal say, etc., etc. He explains it, and then he brings the very famous Gemara that says that Rabbeinu HaKadosh hayanir b'begadim chamudos, that Rabbeinu HaKadosh at the end of his life, after he passed away, he would come back to his family. It's a Gemara in Ksubas that we did in Daf Yomi for some of us, and other Midrashim as well. He would come back, and he talks about how dead people could choose to come back in their tachrichim or in clothing that they wore in their lifetime. There's some element of life here, which is very fascinating to understand. And he still had some power then. And it says that he would be motzi as a Rav Midei Chavasim for Kiddush. He would say Kiddush, which is very shver, and the Mefarshim talk about halachically how could a dead person, he's chavshi min mitzvos. He himself, the Sefer Chassidim seems to address that, although I don't really understand his answer. But he says that that's the pshat, that they're nikarim chayim. That is the pshat, that they're still alive. A field misasim, a patzer b'kiddush be'abayis, because they're still alive. It's mamash halacha l'maisa. They're alive, which is very, very wild to understand this. And the Rav Margalis was a Baki Atzim. He writes that there's a famous Medrash Rabbah. Medrash Rabbah says that Rabbeinu HaKadosh lived in Sipori, which is his city, and he was there for 17 years, and he quoted the pasuk Vayichi Yaakov Beretz Mitzrayim Shva Esrei Shana, that he lived there for 17 years, and they also lived there. And the Megala Mukos brings down that, and also the Ramah Mipano brings down that Rabbeinu HaKadosh was the Nitzutz of Yaakov Avinu, and Chazal say Yaakov lo meis, the Gemara in Taina stuff, Hayam and Aleph. So therefore, that's the pshat, that Rabbeinu HaKadosh also lo meis, so he could also make Kiddush for his children. It's interesting that's the correlation between the two. And they bring down, by the way, that Me'emasai Karan and Shema, there's Ramazim brought down how that is Meramis to Rabbeinu HaKadosh's name, and Yaakov, and Tzipori, and all these other Ramazim. We'll save that for a different time. But anyway, that's what the Sefer Chassidim says, that Mamash, Tzadikim, Misas, and Kruyim, Chayim, normally we translate that when we learn through Bavli, certainly, we like to translate that as, they're still alive, there's a spiritual vitality to them, which is of course true. But here, this pshat, he says it's halachic, that literally he can make Kiddush and be Motzi B'nei Beso if you see them. It's a phenomenal thing to think about. I and Shalman, I'm interested in your ha'aras on that as well.